Good morning. There we go. All right. Instagram's over there telling my followers that I've started a live video. And Facebook is doing whatever the heck Facebook does. Who knows what Facebook does? Facebook's doing its thing. We're over here doing our thing on Instagram and Facebook. Doing some live office hours this morning. Yep, there we go. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Yes. Look, it's a rainy day today. Actually, Instagram followers can't see that, but if you look on Facebook, you'll see that it's a rainy day today. Oh, maybe I can pull it back a little. There you go, Instagram. It's rainy. Yep, it's a bit of a rainy day. Oh, and now you can see my setup here. Let's see. Oh, there we go. There we go. Morning. Welcome to some live office hours with me, Dr. Shannon Coates. Dr. Shannon Coates. Yeah. I am coming to you live from about 45 minutes, maybe an hour north of Toronto, here in Canada. I am living and working. Good morning! I am living and working. Oh, good morning from Sweden. Look at that, too. Love it. Living and working on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Mississauga, and the Wendat Neo-Wencio peoples. And that is an ongoing thought process and consideration. Don't give that land acknowledgement lightly. Give that land acknowledgement to acknowledge being grateful and understanding my place in Canada, in Ontario, in the place where I am. Yes, so had a few conversations in the Speakeasy Cooperative earlier this week about got teenagers on their way out the door to go to school. Good morning, Arietta, over on the West Coast. Hi, nice to see your face. I had a few conversations over in the Speakeasy Cooperative, which I am a charter member. Oh, the Speakeasy Cooperative. I know, very fancy. Very fancy. And there are some terrific conversations that come up there. This community of voice teachers that Michelle Margaret DeVoe founded and mentors maybe is the right word. I don't know, supports may be a good word. Anyway, that's another thing. I'll do some links. But one of the conversations was about, I'm working with a singer who like all of my tricks, all of my tools that I know about raising soft palate aren't working with this singer. And so, what are your tips and tricks? Someone, let me know. And so there are lots of terrific input on that post and, fabulous input. But because of that, because on Mondays in my live office hours, Mondays at 9 a.m., I like to do some sort of practical, some practical information about teaching that you can kind of, try in the studio this week. And then if you join me on Fridays, you'll get a little bit more philosophical kind of art of teaching kind of things. So I thought this would be a great topic to talk about today, Monday, 9 a.m., live office hours. Talk about the soft palate and the role of the soft palate and the kind of mythology, the mythical proportions that the role of the soft palate has taken on in voice pedagogy and in teaching singing. So I want to just talk about three things here. One is sort of the actual anatomy and physiology of the soft palate. And two is like how we've kind of come to associate the soft palate and the position of the soft palate with specific tonal outcomes and how we've kind of come to associate that. And then just talk about some other ways to think about what's happening in the vocal instrument when what we might normally say is, oh, you need to raise the soft palate. So we hear a specific tonal outcome and we think that's because the soft palate is low. And so then we, just a couple of ways to maybe rethink that whole idea around soft palate and soft palate being raised, etc. So first of all, what is it? So first of all, soft palate is this like piece of tissue that sits kind of back here, and if you go all the way back with your tongue, you can feel it. And if you put your finger back on the roof of your mouth, you'll feel that like soft part. That's why it's called the soft palate, or the velum. I mean, I think the fancy word is velum, but all the way to the back there. And if you touch it, you might make yourself throw up. So don't go too far, but you can touch it. But you can feel it with your tongue if your tongue moves that way. Like I can kind of feel it with my tongue, right? At the back there. And it's the port between, it's kind of like the door. It's the nasopharyngeal port is what it's called, but it's kind of like the door between the oral cavity and the pharyngeal cavity and the nasal cavity, or the nasal passageway. So we have the kind of nose area, right? All of the nasal stuff that's up there. And then we have the mouth coming back here, and then kind of back here under the, like just kind of under, in front of the ear, but like kind of under the jaw down here, that's your pharynx. So larynx sits about here, and then about coming up, basically your throat area is kind of the pharynx area. And so the soft palate kind of sits at the very top of the pharyngeal area of the pharynx. And when the soft palate is up, it closes the doorway to the nose. So to the oral passage, the oral cavity, the oral pharynx, all of the things we want to call the nasal passages, whatever you want to call it, all that. Basically, it just closes the doorway. So no air or sound waves can come through the nasal passage when the soft palate is closed. So when it's completely closed, when the soft palate is completely up and completely closing that door, then no air and no sound waves can come through there. Right? Right. So when that soft palate is somewhat down, or all the way down, somewhat down, all the way down, then some air and or some sound waves can travel through the nose. So we associate the lowered soft palate. Oh, and let me say too, a little in terms of physiology, when we swallow, the larynx moves up, the epiglottis comes down and flaps down and covers the larynx. So the larynx moves up, the epiglottis comes down and covers it over, so that it encourages food to go down the esophagus and water to go down the esophagus rather than down the trachea, right? So we get this covering so that it's protected, and the larynx moves up, and you can feel this if you swallow. You'll feel the larynx kind of jut up if you swallow. Oh, there it goes. And my soft palate and my thing went down too. And physiologically speaking, when the larynx moves up, the soft palate also closes and moves up. Why? Because it closes the passageway. Oh, I'm so glad, Brianne. Ooh, you know what? You're coming up on Facebook. You're coming up, Brianne, as a 3rd anniversary follower. So apparently you've been following me for 3 years. Congrats on your anniversary. Anyway, so the larynx moves up. The epiglottis covers the larynx so that we don't get any food coming down the trachea, and all the food goes down the esophagus. And at the same time, the soft palate closes so that we don't get any food or water coming out the nose. So those of you who have that party trick where you can put spaghetti through your nose, or where when you choke and pop comes out your nose or whatever, that's because, I know it's very fancy, that's because your soft palate wasn't closed when you swallowed, or when you were doing whatever you were, if you were putting the spaghetti through, your soft palate wasn't closed. That passageway, the soft palate wasn't all the way up. So the passageway, the door wasn't closed when you swallowed, essentially. So the soft palate wasn't up. So that's physiologically, when the larynx raises, the soft palate also, we have this kind of movement together this way. So the soft palate rising at the same time as the larynx rises. We do actually have this physiological movement. The two kind of structures like to move together in that way. And conversely, when we yawn, and you can feel your larynx is going to go down when you yawn. Oh, let me yawn. Somehow Usually when I fake it, oh, there it goes. There it is. Usually when I fake it, I can get a real one, right? So conversely, when we yawn, the soft palate, or the larynx moves down, and you know what? The soft palate moves down when we yawn. Yeah, I know. The yawning sensation is something we've really associated with high soft palate, but in physiologically speaking, the soft palate moves down. So larynx moves down, soft palate comes down with. Why? Because we're trying to get like a lot of oxygen into the body, right? So why wouldn't we open up the passage through the nose down as well, right? So we can get like mouth and nose. Oh, we get a big yawny feeling there. When you're in a yawn sensation, your soft palate is actually down. Usually, likely, if you are actually using a yawn sensation. So, or if you're actually yawning, right? So why do we get, so that's the physiology. That's the kind of what the soft palate is doing and what it does sort of without us interfering with it, right? This is what, without us thinking about it, subconsciously, this is what happens with that structure. So we've associated, though, the high soft palate with a lofty tonal outcome, with lots of space in the mouth, with like, and especially we've associated the high soft palate positioning with Western classical sound, with lofty, with all of the, and we've kind of made this lofty sound the opposite of nasal sound. And so we've kind of put the like high soft palate, low soft palate means nasal. Definitely that's a nasal sound, and so your soft palate is really low. So we've got to do something about that. Any of those kinds of sounds where we have that tonal outcome that's a little too nasally, a little too squeezed, a little too yeah, I know, Gabby. I know. When we yawn, that's actually, the soft palate's actually low. When we yawn, just like, just when we do it instinctively, right? Yeah, I know. But what we've done is we've associated, so we've like, okay, this, any kind of nasally, any kind of like tinny, any kind of over brassy, too like constricted, any kind of sound like that, we've put that on the opposite spectrum of lofty, and we associate lofty and open and that kind of sound, the Julia Child sound, we associate that with high soft palate, and we've associated any kind of nasally, any kind of those kinds of sounds with low soft palate, because obviously if I'm making a nasal sound or a constricted sound or any kind of sound like that, my soft palate must be low because all of the sound waves must be traveling through my nose, right? So if my soft palate is low, all of those sound waves traveling through my nose, and that is what's making my nasal sound. So there are some issues with the way that we have kind of done this association, the way we've done this mapping. And one of the big issues is that we don't actually have a good sense of what's actually happening back there. We don't actually have a great sense of what's happening in the pharynx in general. We don't have a terrific sense of what's happening with the top of the pharynx, especially the back of the throat. We don't have a terrific mapping of it. We tend to think of that as being huge back there, and it's not actually as big as we think it is. And we tend to think of the tongue as being way smaller than it actually is. Like, we have a pretty poor mapping of what's actually back there. And it's actually not that far back, right? It's only here. Everything happens in front of the ears, friends. It's not like we've got like, how far back does it go? Yeah, it goes back to the top, like just to the ear, right? So we don't actually have a great mapping of it because we tend to think of like the soft palate and the whole back of the whole back of the pharynx as being like to the back of our heads, which is like how we kind of tend to think of it, which is not necessarily, like that's not unuseful, disuseful, not useful. I mean, that can be a very useful way to think about it, but physiologically, we're only going this far back. That's as far back as we're going, just to the ear. It's much less space than we think. So we got this soft palate sensation, and we start to associate lofty, I've got my high soft palate. Clearly, I've got a high soft palate because I've got lofty tonal outcome. It's not nasal. It's not like overly squeezed. I've got this lofty tonal outcome. When in fact, what we may have, the soft palate, my soft palate could actually be up or down or somewhat closed, half closed, not all the way closed. It could be anywhere in between, because that loftiness actually comes from a width across the back and an open pharynx. So that actually comes from a lot more to do with what's happening in the pharynx and in the back of the throat, sort of in terms of horizontal space rather than vertical space. There is vertical space, of course, as well. But really, we're looking for horizontal space when we're looking for that lofty sound. That lofty sound is horizontal space. So we're going to talk about ways to kind of remap that in a minute, because I want to get to little head blowing things. And when you look at the MRIs, for example, of like opera singers and that kind of thing, and when you look at the beatbox versus the opera singer MRI, I don't know if you've seen that or not. If you haven't seen it yet, take a look on YouTube. It's out there. So when you look at those MRIs where you can see the movement of the soft palate, you will see that soft palate is all over the place, all over the place. If there is no, oops, oh gosh, oh, there we go, I'm back. Sorry, Instagram. They're all over the place. Like there is no like continuous high soft palate vertical. There's no continual vertical position for the soft palate in the opera singer. Not at all. Not at all. What you will see is some width. You'll see some opening and closing along the vertical. And why does it feel like our soft palate widens when we lift our cheekbones? It's great, great question, Wendy, and I'm going to get to it in a second. So that up and down, that vertical movement, that's actually all the time, moving all the time. It's changing all the time. Even when I have a continual lofty tonal outcome, it's changing all the time. What we're going for, again, is width. We're going for space this way. And so we'll get to remapping in a minute. So when we're talking about that overly nasal, when I'm talking about that sound, all of the like way too nasally sounds, so we tend to associate that overly nasal, that overly brassy even, that overly constricted sound, we tend to associate that with low soft palate. So then when we're trying to get out of that, we ask singers to have a higher soft palate, right? So we tend to do this because we're like, okay, the soft palate is low, so the door is open to the nose and to the nasal passage. So all of the sound waves are traveling through the nasal passage, which means we're getting a nasal outcome, a nasal tonal outcome, or too brassy or too forward, or yeah, Janice from Friends, exactly. Right? That one. We're getting that sound. So, oh my God. Anyway. But do a little experiment with me here, friends. You can make a nasal brassy sound whether with the soft palate open or closed. Hold on a second. Or with the soft palate, you can make a non-nasal sound with the soft palate open. So here we go. Or with the soft palate down, with that door open. So all of the airwaves are going to come through your nose. We're going to hum. We're going to go. Just do that little exercise for yourself and notice what happens. I made a relatively lofty sound. It was slightly muffled because all of the sound waves are coming through my nose, right? My mouth is closed. There are no sound waves traveling through my mouth. All of the sound waves are traveling through my nose, right? So there's some resonance happening. Those sound waves all traveling through my nose. But the sound waves were being bounced around in my pharynx before they traveled through my nose. So those sound waves, they were muffled. The tonal outcome was muffled because it had to come through my nose, which is not a good resonating space, right? It's mucus and hairs in there, basically, and there's not a lot of space, right? So like, came through the nasal passage, but you hear that? That's a pretty lofty sound. It's muffled, but it's still pretty lofty. It's not like, it's not that one. So the change in the tonal outcome is not because The sound waves are traveling through my nose and had nothing to do with whether or not my soft palate was open or closed. My soft palate was open or down the entire time. All of those sound waves are traveling through my nose on both of those sounds. And if you do that for yourself and put your hand on your larynx and around your throat, you'll probably feel your larynx moving up, and you'll likely feel your tongue engaging a little bit. You'll likely feel some stuff happening in the pharynx, right? Because the sound wave is coming from your vocal folds and it's bouncing around in the pharynx before it comes out your nose. So if it bounces around and it gets that lofty sound in a bigger space and then comes out your nose, it's still going to be lofty. It's just going to be muffled because it's coming out of your nose. If it bounces around a really small constricted space, when it comes out your nose, it's going to sound constricted. It's going to sound nasally. It's going to sound maybe brassy, right? It's going to sound all of those things that we associate with low soft palate, but it has very little to do with the vertical spacing of the soft palate. So let's just start to taste that a little bit, start to play with that a little bit. When you're hearing students this week who you want to have a more lofty sound, rather than thinking, oh, that soft palate is too low, I gotta get that soft palate high, rather than thinking about soft palate, think about what we can do to have an open throat sensation. How can I get the width to happen? How can I get maybe a slightly lowered larynx, even in a contemporary sound? Even in a contemporary sound, if we're looking for a loftier, more open, less constricted sound, you may want a slightly lowered larynx. You may want to have a different jaw shape. You may want to have a different jaw position. You may want to have a different tongue position. You might want to actually front the tongue a little bit more if you're looking for a slightly loftier sound, or a less constricted, less nasal, less brassy sound, right? You may want to, you're going to want to play with the parts of the vocal tract that are below the soft palate. Pharynx, tongue. You're going to want to play with some of that stuff. You're not going to want to play with the soft palate. So, soft palate, what we want to do, and if you're looking for something that is a little bit more brassy and forward and all those kinds of things, you may want to play with, raising the larynx a little bit, not lowering the soft palate. You want to play with raising the larynx. You may want to play with the back of the tongue, moving back a little bit. You may want to play with a little bit of constriction in the throat. All of these words are so bad in our Western classical singing, right? These are not the words we want to use in Western classical singing, but not necessarily, right? How do we know what the most efficient sound is for contemporary? Well, that's a whole course. Brienne, that is a whole course, and I don't even know if I can put it into I think we play, right? We play and we figure out how do I figure out what the tonal outcome is that costs me the least, right? What costs me the least, and what can I sustain for the longest, and how does that connect to the tonal outcome? And if I'm getting the tonal outcome, yeah, you're welcome. And if I'm getting the tonal outcome I want, I'm going to maybe play a little bit with some of these other factors in order to get, in order to get the tonal outcome I want with the greatest efficiency and ease. How much is it costing me, essentially, right? If this is costing me what I can pay, amazing. If long term I'm not going to be able to pay this, then it's costing me too much and I've got to figure out a different way. So I think that's and honestly, that's why you're doing the contemporary practicum. Honestly, that is that's with all styles, right? Am I getting the tonal outcome I want, and is it costing me, what's it costing me to get the tonal outcome? And then I wanted to go back, and we'll just talk in a minute here. Wendy, why does it feel like our soft palate widens when we lift our cheekbones? So physiologically, we can't actually lift the cheekbones, right? This is another thing where we've associated a sensation. So we started to we've started to associate the yawn sensation, with high soft palate. But in fact, it's actually a wide soft palate, and a wide pharyngeal space. oh, I'm about to yawn. But if I yawn for real, my soft palate's coming down, friends. So, we've associated the yawn sensation with a high soft palate, but really what the sensation is, what that sensation is actually associated with is like probably more like width. Now, if we want to call it high soft palate, that's fine. But it will get you into trouble when you start to say, okay, what I need to do here is get that soft palate higher. I got to get that soft palate higher or I got to get that soft palate in in this position, when that's not actually the thing, right? So or maybe the soft palate is in that position and you still have that nasal or that overly bright or that overly forward sound. Why? Because the soft palate's high, but the larynx or the pharynx is still super squeezed. So it's not going to hurt. It's not going to help if you're like, no, get the soft palate higher. None of my tricks are working. Well, of course they're not working because the soft palate's already high. It's not the soft palate. That's the issue here, right? So this is another thing. The soft palate widens when we lift our cheekbones. The cheekbones are like part of the skull. You literally can't move them, right? So you can move some of they're bones, they're cheekbones. So you can't move them, but we do have this sensation. We have this sensation, like I lift my cheekbones, and sometimes the sensation of like narrowing your eyes, right? Or narrowing your focus. Sometimes that sensation can be really useful. And so you see, like I've got the corners of my cheeks. So these are muscles that are on top of the cheekbones that I'm engaging. And so that does have a relationship to what's happening internally, right? So that has a relationship to what's happening internally, and that does have a relationship to the pharynx, to the mouth, and again, remember, this is what we're talking about here, right? This is the space we're talking about here, just in front of the ears. So that's the space right there. So if I'm doing this with my cheekbones and my eyebrows and I'm doing all these other things, that's going to have a relationship to what is happening internally. And again, this is about the relationship of the sensation and then what physiological process we're assigning to specific sensations, right? So whether the sensation is actually a correct mapping of what's happening physiologically or not remains to be seen. In fact, it likely, so many times it isn't, right? And yes, exactly. These are all options. This is not about like, you have to do this thing and these are just options, right, to play with. So some of the things that we use to like raise soft palate, the yawn sensation, for example, the surprise, what does surprise do? Gets width and lowered larynx. Oh, whoops. Now, if you're scared, that gets constricted larynx, right? So scared isn't necessarily. So you got to make sure it's like a happy surprise, like I won $1 million. I won $1 million, or whatever, right? It has to be a happy surprise. But what are some of the other ones? I mean, smelling a rose, that is hilariously not soft palate raising. If I smell something, my mouth is closed, how is the air getting into my body? My soft palate is low, so that the port is open, right? My soft palate is low. If I smell something, the air is going through, my soft palate is low, my soft palate is not high. The onset of a sneeze. Yeah, that's a possibility too. But it's, again, these, like we talk about sniffing a rose or inhaling slowly. These things do not raise the soft palate. No, they do not. Now, they can give us a sensation of what's happening with the soft palate. They can give us a better sensation of what's happening back there and better mapping, so long as we're aware that like when I'm sniffing the rose, I'm not actually raising my soft palate. But what I might want to do afterwards, if I truly am after like a raised soft palate, what I might want to do after that is say, right, I'm going to inhale, and then that space where I felt the cool air moving back is where I'm going to like feel a lift back there. If you want to work on if you want to work that soft palate on a vertical plane. The other one that can be useful for mapping is an NG, for example. So I've got the back of my tongue up against my soft palate at the back there, right? Or up against the back of the throat. But again, I've closed my mouth off. So where are those sound waves traveling through? The sound waves are traveling through my nose, which means my soft palate is down. So when you're doing an NG exercise, this is not a soft palate raising exercise. This is not teaching the body to raise the soft palate, right? The NG means that the back of the tongue is up against the soft palate is low, and the space, like, there's no sound wave or air coming through my mouth when my soft palate is connected to, like, I've closed it. I've closed that space. There's no space. So what am I doing there? I'm changing my pharyngeal space. I'm changing the pharynx. That's what I'm changing. I'm changing my throat space, right? I'm changing with my tongue. My larynx is probably rising and lowering. I'm likely doing a little bit of constricting and releasing. Like, that's what I'm changing. The width and the diameter of my pharyngeal space. I'm not changing where my soft palate is. My soft palate is low. It's not open. So you can use that NG exercise beautifully to kind of map some things back there and to find that loftier, if you want, that loftier sensation. There we go. Still got my soft palate is still low because it's still connected to my tongue, right? Still connected to the back of my tongue. But hear how lofty that sound is. But of course it's going to be a little bit muffled because all of the sound waves are coming through my nose. Why are they coming through my nose? Because my soft palate is low. So I'm going. So is that a nasal sound because all the sound waves are coming through my nose? No. That is a nasal sound because I just did a constricting thing in my pharynx. I changed the shape of my pharynx. That's why it's a nasal sound, or a forward sound, or a bright sound, or a brassy sound, or whatever we want to call it. So there's your little soft palate fla for the day. And here's my thought for the week in terms of when you're listening to singers and you're thinking, okay, this is too lofty. Sorry, this is not lofty enough. The sound isn't lofty enough, and or the sound is too constricted, or it's too brassy, or it's too nasal, or it's too forward, or too bright. Oh, sorry. There we go. Sorry, Instagram. My phone's running out of batteries, so it keeps giving me notifications and pausing. So start to think of, what can I do to find width in the soft palate area or in the pharyngeal area, and start to think of the soft palate as not being on a vertical plane, but start to think of the whole back of the mouth as being on a horizontal plane. So start to just transition that mapping in your mind from like up, down, vertical plane of the soft palate to width across that space. I mean, there's some other structures back there, and we don't have to get into that right now, but just know that there's some other structures back there where we can have, I'm having width across that space. And then whether or not my soft palate is high or low doesn't really matter as much. Or doesn't have the same like primary importance that we tend to give it. Yes. Okay? Okay. Have fun with that this week with some soft palate reframing, remapping, changing it up. Consider the tonal outcome and play with your students. That is one way to play, is to play with humming or NGs, and play with like, all right, I'm going to open with that space now, rather than how lofty can I make it inside? And then open and see what kind of space I've got there, what kind of tonal outcome I'm getting. Just intoning. Is that what that's called? Intoning, toning, whatever that's called. Okay. Have a great week. I will see you on Friday. And I am talking about contemporary tonal outcomes. I'm talking about contemporary versus classical, like a week and a half from now, I think. I think it's a week from Wednesday at my contemporary pop-up class. If you're interested in learning more about that, my website, shannon-coates.com. And then, and I'm doing a contemporary voice practicum the week after. So 2 weeks intensive where we get down and dirty with a lot of these concepts that are kind of not quite like settled in our heads. Yeah. So we get kind of down and dirty with them, and we kind of really hammer them out. And also we apply in the voice studio. So we talk to each other. We've got like the conversation going consistently, and we demonstrate for each other, and we even teach for each other sometimes, or we pull up clips of students and what do you think? And so we kind of have these discussions. So there's lots of applicable. I love the idea of dropping the palate with the breath of the NG. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you can just like, if I've got my NG, if I've got the NG up there, my soft palate is low. So then I'm changing tonal outcomes with what I'm doing in the pharynx, right? Yeah. So play with that. It's a great way to map it. Yeah, it's a great way to map. All right. See you later. Yeah. Oh, and if you're interested in the contemporary pop-up, the contemporary practicum, the 2-week intensive, send me a message or check it out on my website. So shannon-coates.com. See you soon. Ending video.